5 crows settled on the rice house roof before sunrise. Not one, not two, 5. The old people on Ashcross Plantation saw them lined up against the gray South Carolina sky and stopped speaking. In the low country, birds knew things before men did. They knew when storms were climbing the coast. They knew when fever was moving through the quarters. And they knew when blood was about to enter the water. By nightfall, the first white man at Ashcross would be dead. And the one they would never suspect was the man they had already robbed of a voice. His name was Isaiah Reed. He was 26 years old, black, enslaved, narrow in the waist, strong in the shoulders, with hands hardened by tidal rice and a back marked by years of punishment. He had not spoken since he was a boy. Some said fever burned his throat. Some said a runaway patrol struck him so hard with the butt of a musket that sound never came back. But the people who had lived at Ashcross long enough knew the darker version. They said Isaiah had screamed when his mother was chained for sale to a Charleston broker, screamed until Master Ash ordered the overseer to quiet him for good. After that day, Isaiah's mouth still opened, his eyes still burned, but no voice came. Ashcross stood along the Blackwater edge of the Waccamaw, where the fields were not fields so much as drowned squares of labor. The rice trunks controlled the tide. The ditches cut the earth into narrow veins. At sunrise, hundreds of enslaved men and women walked barefoot into mud that swallowed the ankles, then the calves, then sometimes the dead. Everything there had a sound. The boards of the footbridges, the chains at the tool shed, the cough of the old men in the quarters, the slap of mosquitoes against sweating skin, the overseer's whip. Everything spoke except Isaiah. That silence made men careless. Bram Rusk, the field overseer, liked to say the mute was useful because he could not spread rebellion. Mr. Caleb White, the estate factor, called him half a ghost. Abel Dre, the slave catcher who came through twice a month with bloodhounds, once laughed that a tongueless man was God's own invention for plantation order. The others laughed with him. There were 5 men who truly ruled Ashcross when the master was away. Bram Rusk, who carried the whip. Caleb White, who counted every barrel of rice and every black body in the same ledger. Abel Dre, who hunted people for money. Holland Pike, the floodgate foreman, who could drown a field or a man with the same indifferent hand. And young Nathaniel Ash, the master's nephew, soft-palmed and frightened, but heir to every cruelty that had made him comfortable. They believed power meant never having to notice the eyes beneath bowed heads. Isaiah noticed everything. He noticed which hinge on the tool shed never caught. He noticed which boards on the rice mill gallery groaned and which did not. He noticed that Bram Rusk drank peach brandy after dusk and walked alone to the privy behind the cypress stand. He noticed that Caleb White locked his ledgers in a chest but left the kitchen passage unbarred in summer heat. He noticed that Abel Dre tied his hounds close when thunder came, because dogs that hunt men still fear the sky. For years, Isaiah stored these things where other men stored words, in silence, in memory, in a patience so deep it looked almost like obedience. The morning the crows came, Isaiah was working the lower east field beside an older man named Moses Kane. Moses had survived 3 plantations, 2 fever seasons, and 1 sale that split his family so cleanly he still woke, reaching for people who were not there. He leaned close without looking at Isaiah. They found Judge Harlow's driver in the creek last week, Moses whispered. Throat opened. No tracks. No witness. Isaiah's sickle paused for less than a heartbeat. Then it kept moving. Moses lowered his voice. White folks say British raiders did it, or Maroons from the swamp. But I heard something else. Isaiah did not turn. Whoever did it left a black feather in the man's hand. A whip cracked somewhere across the mud flats. Rusk's voice cut the morning apart. No talking in the line. The overseer rode the field bank on a brown mare, red-faced from heat and liquor before noon. His boots were polished. His hat was wide. His eyes were always searching for a reason to hurt somebody. He stopped beside Isaiah. Well, look at Moses telling secrets to the dead. Rusk leaned down from the saddle. What did he say to you, mute? Something important? Isaiah kept his eyes on the rice plants. Rusk smiled. That's right. Nothing to answer with. Best kind of property, if you ask me. One that knows pain and cannot complain. Moses stiffened. Everyone around them went still. Isaiah slowly lifted his eyes. Only his eyes. Rusk's smile stayed on his face, but something underneath it moved. The smallest uncertainty. A crack no one else would have seen. For one moment, overseer and slave looked at each other across all the laws and guns and ledgers that claimed one man owned the other. Then Rusk jerked the reins. Work, he snapped, and rode on. Isaiah bent back over the rice. But something had already begun moving inside him, not rage. Rage had been there too long to be new. This was colder. This was decision. By noon, heat rose from the drowned fields until the air shimmered. Women at the wash tubs wrung out shirts that would never be clean. Children carried water in buckets too heavy for their arms. At the edge of the shade, Aunt Liza sat with a basket of sweetgrass in her lap, weaving without looking at her hands. She was old enough that no one knew her exact age. She had delivered babies, set broken wrists, closed dead eyes, and remembered names the plantation tried to erase. When Isaiah came for water, her fingers closed around his wrist. 5 birds on the rice house, she murmured. He did not move. 5 birds for 5 debts. Isaiah's hand tightened around the dipper. Aunt Liza's milky eyes lifted to his face. Child, blood answers blood, but it don't wash the world clean. Isaiah looked toward the big house, white columns bright beyond the oaks, then toward the quarters, where children born in bondage played in dirt beside cabins built to outlast their childhoods. His lips moved soundlessly. No, blood would not wash the world clean, but it might stain the guilty enough for God to see them. That evening, the sky turned the color of rust. The work bell released the field crews, and the enslaved people of Ashcross moved toward the quarters with the slow, careful posture of the exhausted. Isaiah walked with them until the path bent behind the smokehouse. Then he disappeared. No one saw him leave, because no one was trained to see a man they had decided was harmless. He moved through the live oaks, past hanging moss, past the dark rectangle of the indigo shed, toward the cypress stand, where Bram Rusk went every night after brandy. The weapon was not a fine knife. It was a rice hook broken at the handle, sharpened along the curve with stolen patience. Isaiah had hidden it beneath a loose plank in the cooper's shed for 3 weeks. He waited under the cypress. Mosquitoes moved around his face. Sweat ran down his neck. From the big house came the faint sound of laughter. From the quarters came a woman humming low to a child. Then came boots, unsteady boots. Rusk stepped into the trees, muttering to himself, one hand fumbling with his belt. He smelled of brandy, horse sweat, and the sour confidence of a man who had never once been made afraid in the dark. Isaiah came from behind him, one hand clamped over the overseer's mouth, the hook pressed into the soft place beneath his ribs. Rusk jerked once, hard enough to drive both men against the cypress bark. His hand clawed at Isaiah's wrist. His boots tore at the leaves, but no scream came. Isaiah held him close, chest to back, like a terrible embrace. Rusk's eyes rolled wide. In the last seconds, he understood. He understood the mute had planned this. He understood silence had been watching him for years. Isaiah leaned close to his ear. His lips shaped the words with no sound at all. For my mother, for every back you opened, for every name you forgot. When it was over, Isaiah lowered him to the ground. Not gently, not cruelly, just carefully. He placed one black crow feather beside the dead man's hand, then vanished into the trees. By dawn, Ashcross was no longer a plantation. It was a wound with people running around it. The cookhouse girl found Rusk before first light and screamed until the bell started ringing. The white men came armed. The enslaved were dragged from cabins, counted, searched, struck, accused, and counted again. Master Edmund Ash stood in his linen nightshirt beside the body, gray with fury. "Which one?" he shouted. "Which one of you did this?" No one answered. 300 people stood in the wet morning air and gave him back the silence he had forced on them for generations. Caleb Wack knelt beside Rusk's body, his ledgerman's mind trying to arrange terror into columns. "Not a robbery," he said. "No coin taken, no weapon left." Abel Dre arrived before noon with 2 hounds and a pistol in his sash. He let the dogs nose the cypress stand, then the quarters, then the fields. They found nothing. Isaiah had washed in the black water before dawn. The rice hook had gone into the marsh, weighted with stone. His clothes had been scrubbed in ash and mud until they smelled like every other laboring body on Ashcross. Dre looked at the gathered enslaved men one by one. His eyes stopped on Isaiah. "The dumb one," he said. "Bring him here." 2 men shoved Isaiah forward. Dre circled him, close enough that Isaiah could smell the tobacco in his teeth. "Everybody forgets a quiet dog can bite," Dre said. Isaiah stared past him. Dre slapped him hard. Isaiah fell to one knee, then rose. No sound, no protest, no hatred visible enough to hang. Dre watched him for a long time, then spat. "Too simple," he said. "This was outside work, maroon work, or war work. That was the first mistake. They believed the danger came from the swamp, from runaway camps, from British movement along the coast, from anything that lived beyond the fences. They did not believe justice could be standing barefoot in front of them with bloodless hands." 3 nights passed. Ashcross tightened like a fist. The men moved in pairs. Lanterns burned all night. Patrols rode the banks with muskets. Curfew fell on the quarters before the sun had fully disappeared. But fear has weight. Men carrying fear make poor decisions. On the 4th morning, Abel Dre announced he was riding south to fetch 2 suspected runaways from a tavern road near Georgetown. He would be back by noon the next day. He took 1 assistant, 2 dogs, and 3 chained prisoners he planned to sell once he had finished his work. Isaiah learned this from a stable boy with a split lip who whispered it while pouring mash for the horses. That evening, Isaiah found Moses behind the corn crib. He did not need words. Their hands had made language over the years. Work language, warning language, survival language. Isaiah pointed south, then made the sign for hounds, then drew one finger across his own palm. Moses closed his eyes. You fixin' to follow Dre. Isaiah nodded once. Boy, after Rusk, they looking for ghosts. After Dre, they'll look at us. Isaiah's face did not change. Moses looked toward the quarters, where his granddaughter was braiding grass beside the fire. They already looking at us, he whispered. Isaiah touched Moses' shoulder. Moses breathed in slowly. I'll say fever took you. Liza will swear you were sweating under a blanket by moonrise. Before midnight, Isaiah was in the swamp. He did not move like a runaway. A runaway was hunted by fear. Isaiah moved like a man hunting fear itself. He followed the old rice dikes south, crossed flooded ground, where the moon broke into pieces on the water, past alligator slides and cottonmouth nests, and reached the plank road before the night was half gone. Dre had stopped at a two-room tavern near a ferry crossing. The horses stood under a shed roof. The dogs were tied behind the building, restless and whining at the thunderclouds building inland. The prisoners sat chained to a post beside the smokehouse. Two young men and a woman with a child at her breast. Isaiah crouched in the grass until one of the men saw him. The prisoner went rigid. Isaiah put a finger to his lips, then pointed toward the tavern. The young man understood and whispered, "Back room. Dre sleeps with the pistol." Isaiah nodded. Thunder rolled. The dogs began to bark. Not at him, at the sky. That was why he had chosen this night. He moved behind the tavern, found the rear shutter unlatched, and slipped into a kitchen that smelled of grease and stale corn whiskey. Dre's assistant slept in a chair near the hearth, mouth open, musket across his lap. Isaiah passed him without a sound. In the back room, Abel Dre lay on a cot with one boot still on. His pistol rested beneath his right hand. His mouth twitched in sleep like he was calling dogs through a dream. Isaiah stood over him. This man had dragged mothers from cane brakes, boys from pine woods, husbands from hidden cabins. He had sold fear as a service and called it law. Isaiah reached down and took the pistol first. Dre woke as the weapon left his fingers. His eyes opened. He saw Isaiah. For a moment he did not understand. Then he understood too much. Isaiah placed one hand over his mouth and drove the blade down once. Clean, final. Thunder swallowed the small sound Dre made. When it was done, Isaiah took the keys from his belt and went back outside. The chained prisoners stared at him as if he had risen from the marsh. He unlocked them one by one. The woman clutched her baby close. "Where we go?" Isaiah pointed to the darkest line of trees. North first, then water, then no road. The young man who had spoken before looked at the dead tavern behind them, then at the mute stranger. "You coming?" Isaiah shook his head. The young man seemed to understand that some men ran toward freedom and some stayed behind to make room for it. They disappeared into the trees just as rain began to fall. By morning, Abel Dre was dead, 3 prisoners were gone, and Ashcross was no longer frightened. It was infected. The fear entered the walls. It entered the food. It entered the sleep of every white man who had ever laughed at a scream. Master Ash sent riders to neighboring estates. Caleb White wrote letters with a shaking hand. Nathaniel Ash stopped sleeping alone. Holland Pike ordered the floodgate crews watched at all times. And because power is rarely honest about fear, they punished the people who had the least. 2 enslaved men from another plantation were dragged to Ashcross and accused of conspiracy. They denied it through swollen mouths. They denied it after the lash. They denied it until denial no longer mattered. At dusk, they were hanged from the oak beside the rice mill. Every enslaved person at Ashcross was forced to watch. Isaiah stood in the crowd, eyes fixed forward. Aunt Liza stood beside him, lips moving in prayer or curse. It was hard to tell which. When the body stopped moving, something inside Isaiah changed again. Before, his vengeance had been a debt. Now it was a clock. Every hour these men remained alive, someone else would be made to pay for their fear. The third death came from water. That was fitting, because Holland Pike trusted water more than men. Pike was the floodgate foreman. He controlled the trunks that let the tide in and out of the rice fields. He knew how to drown weeds, how to salt a field, how to trap a snake in a ditch, and how to keep enslaved laborers knee-deep until fever made them obedient. He was not loud like Rusk, not greedy like Wyke, not theatrical like Dre. Pike's cruelty was practical. If a man slowed the crew, Pike cut his ration. If a woman collapsed in the mud, Pike marked her as weak. If a child got too close to the trunk gate, Pike kicked him aside and called it instruction. On the 6th day after Dre's murder, heavy rain came down from the north and met a high tide coming in from the river. The lower embankment began to fail before dawn. If the bank broke, 40 acres of young rice would be ruined. Suddenly, fear of murder became secondary to fear of lost profit. Every available hand was sent to the dikes. Men carried sandbags. Women hauled poles. Children filled baskets with clay. White guards dropped muskets to hold shovels. For the first time in memory, the machinery of Ashcross stuttered because nature had given it no time to pose. Chaos made gaps. Isaiah saw one. Pike stood waist deep in water near the eastern trunk, shouting for longer poles. The current rushed through the half-open gate with enough force to pull a grown man sideways. Isaiah joined the crew nearest him, lifting a cypress beam into position. Pike spotted him. "You, mute, down here." Isaiah stepped into the water. "Hold the brace steady," Pike ordered. "If you let it shift, I'll skin you when this is done." Isaiah gripped the beam. The rain fell so hard the world became gray. Pike leaned over the gate mechanism, both hands on the iron handle, trying to force it shut against the tide. He cursed. The handle slipped. He ordered Isaiah closer. "Put your shoulder here." Isaiah moved. The two men strained against the gate. For a few seconds, they looked like laboring partners. Then Isaiah shifted his foot to a place he had already tested, a submerged rut where the mud held firm. Pike's foot had no such mercy. Isaiah drove his shoulder sideways, not enough to look like an attack from far away. Enough. Pike stumbled into the rush of water. His hip struck the gate frame. His boot wedged beneath the submerged brace. The current twisted him down. He came up coughing. "You fool," he shouted. "My leg's caught." As Isaiah stood 3 feet away, rain running down his face, Pike's anger faltered. "Help me." Isaiah did not move. The foreman looked at him then, truly looked, and saw what Rusk and Dre had seen too late. "No," Pike whispered. "No, it's you." The current pulled harder. Pike grabbed for the beam, missed. His hand slapped water. "Help me, somebody." But thunder covered him. The workers were farther down the dike, fighting the failing bank. No one saw the exact moment Holland Pike went under. Isaiah waited until the water stopped thrashing. Then he lunged forward, grabbed at the empty surface, and began making the wild, panicked motions of a man trying to save another. When the others finally looked, they saw the mute slave in chest-deep water, reaching desperately for a foreman the river had already taken. Pike's body was found an hour later in the weeds below the trunk. Accident, the white men said at first. Then they looked at one another and did not believe their own mouths. 3 men down, 2 by violence, 1 by water, no proof, no witness. Only a mute who had tried to help. Caleb White stopped calling him half a ghost. Now he would not say Isaiah's name at all. That night, Ashcross became a fort. Militia from the parish arrived with muskets and bayonets. A captain named Mercer took command of the grounds. Sentries stood at the big house doors. Lanterns burned at the windows. Nathaniel Ashe and Caleb White slept in adjoining rooms with pistols under their pillows and soldiers in the hall. Master Ashe talked of selling half the plantation before the harvest. Caleb White argued against it. Sell the people and you admit fear, he said. Nathaniel drank until his hands steadied. We should leave. White stared at him. Your uncle would rather burn this house than run from his own slaves. Neither man knew how close that sentence came to prophecy. Inside the quarters, the elders whispered. Some called Isaiah cursed. Some called him chosen. Moses called him dangerous and right, which was the heaviest kind of truth. Aunt Liza pulled Isaiah aside beside the hearth. You think killing 5 men ends this? Isaiah looked at the children sleeping along the cabin wall. His hand moved slowly. No. Then why finish it? He pointed toward the big house, then pressed his fist against his own chest. Because they must learn. Liza's expression softened with grief. Learn what? Isaiah's lips formed the words. That we remember. The 4th death required help. Not strength, not stealth. Help. That was the part the masters never understood. They thought terror made people alone. Sometimes it did. But sometimes terror taught people to speak without speaking, to move without leaving tracks, to carry a plan inside ordinary chores. The help came from Ruth Ann, the house cook. She was 50 if she was a day, dark-skinned, broad-shouldered, with burned forearms from 30 years of kitchens, and a face that had learned to hide knives behind kindness. She had raised Nathaniel Ashe from infancy because his own mother did not believe in tending children when enslaved women could do it for her. Nathaniel still called her Mammy Ruth when he wanted comfort. Ruth Ann hated that name with a patience that could have powered a mill. Her son had been 12 when Caleb White accused him of stealing sugar and ordered him whipped until fever took him 2 nights later. When Isaiah came to her in the smokehouse after dark and made his silent request, she did not ask if he was the one. She only said, What do you need? The big house had locked its doors to the outside, but it still had to eat. It still needed linen. It still needed chamber pots emptied, fires built, lamps trimmed, boots polished, plates cleared, wine poured, prayers staged, and fear comforted. Ruth Ann carried those needs like keys. For 2 days, she watched the guards and learned their rhythm. The young ones grew sleepy after midnight. The older ones checked the front entrance more than the rear stairs. The soldier outside Nathaniel's room leaned his musket against the wall when he rubbed his eyes. On the 3rd night, she made one small adjustment. She left the linen room latch unhooked. Nothing more. A hinge in the world. Isaiah reached the big house after midnight, crossing the yard beneath a moon covered by cloud. He climbed the rear service wall by handholds made for no one, but discovered by those forced to repair what others owned. He entered through the linen room. Inside, the air smelled of soap, fear, and candle wax. He moved through the servant passage, narrow enough that rich men never had to imagine it existed. The walls there were unfinished, the floorboards thin. Generations of enslaved feet had carried silver, food, water, and secrets through that hidden vein of the house. Nathaniel's chamber lay at the end of the second floor hall. One soldier sat outside it, asleep. Isaiah passed him with the patience of smoke. Nathaniel Ashe was awake. That almost ruined everything. He sat on the edge of the bed in his nightshirt, pistol in his lap, staring at the door as if death had manners and would knock. Isaiah stood in the shadow behind the wardrobe. Nathaniel did not see him. The young heir whispered to himself, "Just until morning, just until morning." Isaiah waited. Minutes passed. The candle guttered. Nathaniel lifted the pistol and aimed at the door with both hands, practicing courage against emptiness. Then he lowered it and began to cry. Not loudly, not beautifully. He cried like a child who had inherited a kingdom of suffering and discovered too late that crowns did not stop knives. Isaiah stepped from the shadow. Nathaniel turned, his mouth opened. Isaiah caught the pistol before the shot fired, twisting it away. The report cracked into the ceiling. The soldier outside woke with a shout. Isaiah had seconds. Nathaniel tried to crawl backward across the bed. "Please," he gasped. "I never did anything." That was the first honest thing he had said. Isaiah looked at him. Never did anything. Never stopped anything. Never questioned the ledgers. Never freed the child Ruth Ann buried. Never asked why his comfort required locked quarters, stripped backs, sold mothers, drowned fields. Isaiah's lips moved. That is the same thing. The blade went in once. Nathaniel folded around it, shocked not by pain, but by accountability. Isaiah pulled the door open before the soldier could force it from the other side. Smoke from the pistol filled the hall. Confusion gave him the width of a breath. He drove his shoulder into the waking soldier, sent him crashing into the opposite wall, then ran the servant passage while shouts tore through the house behind him. He escaped through the same linen room. But this time, someone saw. A militia boy at the rear steps glimpsed a black figure drop from the wall and vanish toward the quarters. By dawn, Captain Mercer had Isaiah in chains. They dragged him before the white columns of the big house, stripped his shirt, searched his body, opened his mouth, examined his hands, his feet, his shoulders. No blood, no fresh wound, no pistol mark, no proof. But fear no longer required proof. Mercer stared at him with hard eyes. "I don't need your voice," he said. "I need time." They threw Isaiah into the old rice storehouse with Moses, Ruth Ann, Aunt Liza, and 12 others taken at random. Collective guilt, collective hunger, collective punishment. For 4 days, they were given water once each morning and corn mush after dusk. Outside, they could hear Ashcross grinding forward under military guard. The dikes were repaired. The rice was tended. The dead air was buried. Caleb White moved into Master Ash's study with 2 soldiers at the door and 4 more below the windows. Only one crow remained, and everyone knew its name. Caleb White had never struck Isaiah as often as Rusk. He had never hunted people like Dre. He had never drowned fields like Pike. He had never inherited innocence like Nathaniel pretended to. White was worse in the way paper can be worse than a whip. A whip tears the skin. A ledger can erase the person. White decided who was prime, who was damaged, who could be sold without loss, who had children worth keeping, who had children worth moving. He had written Isaiah's mother into a sale lot. He had reduced her to age, sex, condition, price. He had signed the page that sent Isaiah's sister south. The final debt was ink. In the storehouse, Ruth Ann sat with her back against a grain barrel, wrists raw from rope. "Can you get out?" she whispered. Isaiah studied the wall. Old buildings kept old secrets. One plank near the rear had softened from years of damp. He had found it on the first night by pressing his shoulder to the boards, inch by inch, when the guards were changing watch. On the fourth night, rain came. Not heavy at first, then harder, then hard enough to make the roof speak. The guards outside cursed and moved under the overhang. Isaiah began working the plank. Moses watched, face tight with fear. "If you leave, they'll kill us for it." Isaiah stopped. That was the truth he had tried not to look at. The plantation would punish those left behind because plantation justice always chose the nearest black body. Aunt Liza spoke from the dark. "They'll kill us anyway, Moses. Slow, if not tonight." Ruth Ann nodded. "Finish it." Isaiah pushed the plank again. This time it gave. The gap was narrow, too narrow for most men. But hunger, labor, and violence had carved Isaiah into something the world kept underestimating. He slid through, scraping skin from his ribs, dropping into mud behind the storehouse as thunder cracked above him. He did not go to the quarters. He went to the rice mill. If the big house was the face of Ashcross, the rice mill was its stomach. It cleaned the grain, it packed the barrels, it turned stolen labor into money. From the mill, a covered walkway led to the counting room beside Master Ash's study. White had chosen that counting room because it had no exterior door. A safe room, he thought. But safe rooms depend on what you are afraid of. White feared men with guns. He did not fear the building that fed his ledgers. Isaiah reached the mill and climbed through the lower chute where rice husks fell into sacks. The smell of dust filled his nose and throat. For a moment, he nearly coughed. He bit his lip until he tasted blood. Inside, the machinery stood still for the night. Wooden gears, belts, pulleys, grinding stones, barrels stacked like columns in a poor man's temple. He found the lamp oil near the maintenance bench. He did not burn the quarters. He did not burn the cabins. He burned the mill, small at first, a rag under the husk bin, oil along the dry feed boards, a second flame near the stairs. Then he moved toward the counting room. By the time smoke reached the soldiers, the fire already had teeth. "Fire!" someone shouted. The alarm shattered Ashcross. Soldiers ran for buckets. House servants were dragged from sleep. Men formed lines to the well. The two guards outside White's door looked at each other, then at the smoke under the eaves. One stayed. One ran. Then the ceiling above the covered walkway began to glow orange. The remaining guard abandoned the door. That was all Isaiah needed. He entered the counting room through the service hatch used to pass ledgers from the mill office. Caleb White stood in the center of the room with a pistol in one hand and a ledger in the other. Not a Bible, not a portrait, a ledger. Even at the end, he tried to save the paper. He saw Isaiah crawling through smoke and froze. "You," he said. Isaiah stood. His face was streaked with soot. Rainwater dripped from his sleeves. Firelight moved behind him like something alive. White raised the pistol. His hand shook. "I knew it," he said. "I knew there was a mind in that dumb skull." Isaiah stepped forward. Wyke fired. The ball tore through Isaiah's left shoulder. Pain hit white and hot. He staggered but did not fall. Wyke dropped the ledger and tried to reload with trembling hands. Isaiah crossed the room before powder met pan. He knocked the pistol away. Wyke backed into the desk. "Why?" he demanded, voice cracking. "Why me? I only kept accounts." Isaiah looked down at the ledger on the floor. Names, ages, prices, conditions. His mother's line might have been in a book like that, his sister's too. Half of Ashcross lived inside pages that denied they were souls. He picked up the ledger with his good hand and threw it into the fire, licking through the wall. The pages curled, the ink blackened. Wyke made a sound of grief, deeper than any sounds he had made for the dead. Isaiah understood then. This man had loved the record more than the people. The blade entered beneath Wyke's ribs. Once, then stillness. As Wyke sank to the floor, Isaiah knelt beside him. Blood from his shoulder dropped onto the boards between them. Wyke stared up, eyes wet with terror and disbelief. Isaiah's lips moved with the final words no one heard. "You counted us. Now count yourself." The ceiling beam cracked. Isaiah rose. The room was filling with smoke. Fire had moved into the mill beams. Outside, men shouted for water that came too late. Captain Mercer appeared in the doorway, musket raised. "I knew," Mercer said through the smoke. "I knew it was you." Isaiah turned toward him. For the first time since childhood, something like a sound tore at the ruined place inside his throat. Not a word, not even a cry, a broken breath. A storm trying to pass through a locked door. Mercer aimed. Then the mill beam collapsed between them, sending flame and sparks across the room. Mercer stumbled back. When the smoke cleared, Isaiah was gone. He crawled through the burning hatch, down the husk chute, out beneath the mill, and into the rain where the earth had become black mud. His shoulder bled badly. Every breath scraped his throat raw. Behind him, the rice mill burned high enough to light the river. People ran, not just white people. Enslaved men and women broke from the bucket lines. Some fled into the swamp. Some cut horses loose. Some opened the storehouse and pulled Moses, Ruth Ann, Aunt Liza, and the others into the storm. In one night, Ashcross lost its air, its factor, its mill, its ledgers, and the illusion that fear moved in only one direction. By dawn, the plantation still stood, but it had been changed. The big house survived with scorched walls. The mill was gone. Caleb Wyke was found near the burned ledger chest, one hand curled around Ash. Master Ash returned from Charleston 2 days later and found his empire wounded beyond repair. His nephew was buried. His overseer was dead. His slave catcher was dead. His floodgate man was dead. His factor was dead. The rice mill was a skeleton. Dozens of enslaved people had vanished into the swamp during the fire. Captain Mercer reported that the mute slave, Isaiah Reed, had likely died in the blaze or the marsh from his wound. Likely. That was the word men use when they need uncertainty to become comfortable. No body was found. Ashcross was sold the next spring to a merchant who cared more for barrels than blood. The name changed. The ledgers changed. The punishments continued, because one man's vengeance could not break a whole nation's sin. Isaiah knew that. He had never believed 5 deaths could end slavery. He had only believed 5 men should not carry their cruelty safely into old age. He lived 2 more years in the swamp beyond the Waccamaw, in a hidden settlement of runaways, widows, children, and men who slept with knives because freedom there was fragile and hunted. His shoulder never healed right. Fever came and went. Sometimes he woke reaching for the voice that had been taken from him and found only air. But on certain nights when crows gathered in the cypress trees and the moon made the water look like hammered iron, Isaiah would sit outside his shelter and listen. He listened to frogs, to wind, to people breathing in sleep without chains on their ankles. And sometimes he smiled, not because the world had become just. It had not. Not because suffering had been undone. It could not be. He smiled because Bram Rusk, Abel Dre, Holland Pike, Nathaniel Ashe, and Caleb White had all died knowing the same truth. The people they called silent had been listening. The people they called helpless had been learning. The people they counted like property had names that outlived ledgers. Years later, Aunt Liza told a story wherever she was sold next. She told it in cabins beside dying fires, to children who needed to understand that obedience was not the same as surrender. She changed details when she had to. Sometimes the plantation had a different name. Sometimes the birds were crows. Sometimes ravens. Sometimes only shadows on the roof. But she never changed the heart of it. A mute man had walked through a kingdom built on stolen voices. He had answered 5 debts. And when the masters finally heard him, it was not because he spoke. It was because their world had begun to burn. They stole his tongue. They never learned how loud silence could become.